Yo, YouTube, A-rig season is upon us, and I thought I'd show you how I make my own homemade A-rigs. And I guarantee you they are the best A-rigs you're gonna find on YouTube, and I've checked all the videos. I can make an A-rig for less than $5, and that's using owner hyperwire swivels and owner hyperwire split rings. I'll link all the components in the description, and I'm going to show you guys step by step how I do this. It is quite a process, so this is going to be a long video, so I do apologize for that, but it is well worth it. If you want to throw A-rigs for less than $5 a rig, man, this is definitely worth watching, and I guarantee you they're as good as the store, if not better. I noticed some of the ones that I bought before, all the wires are crimped together at the head, and I thought, man, that's just terrible. I spent 15 bucks on one, and after just bending the arms a couple of times, the crimp came loose, the wires came loose, arms would fall off, and I'm like, this is garbage, man. So I came up with my own. I've got guys that I've given these to. They've caught over 250 fish, I guess I should say. This guy's caught striper, bass. He's even caught a halibut on one of my rigs.
That's a first for me.
Guy is nuts. He throws them more than anybody I know. His name is Lucas. I'll go ahead and give his handle in the description as well. And I've sent him some A-rigs because this guy, hands down, throws A-rigs more than anybody I've ever seen. And he does have his own Instagram channel, and you could check out all the fish he's caught. I wasn't happy with any of those videos that I saw, so I spent literally about 6 months making my own A-rigs, putting them together, changing things, switching out components. I started with, just cheaper components. I wanted to, make them as least as expensive as I could. If you're like me, you want to throw A-rigs, but you're not going to spend $25 to $30 on one. That is just ridiculous. And just looking at the rigs, I'm like, it's just wires. It's just a blade, some swivels. I could make that. Well, 6 months later, I finally did make it. And that's 6 months before I even took it to the lake. Then I took it to the lake, and of course another 3 months in changing things that I didn't like, how they swam, just the durability of the components, which got me thinking I need to use better components, because I had swivels. I was using just cheapo swivels for like the head swivel where you tie your line to. Got stuck on a rock and it snapped a head swivel. I gave one to a buddy of mine, and he got stuck on a rock, head swivel broke. So use quality components. It would suck to get anything bigger than like a 3-pound bass. You set the hook and the thing just falls apart. I use owner hyperwire parts, or I will use P-line crosslock swivels depending on what people want. I make these for my friends and family. I've had a couple of bass that were caught by some people that I know. He wants discretion, but I'll show a pic here. Of a 10.03 pound bass caught at this local lake here at Folsom Lake. That is a monster bass for Folsom Lake. It's just, he's the only person I've ever known to pull out a double-digit bass out of Folsom Lake. The average bass there is less than 2 pounds. So getting a 10.03 on one of the rigs I made is unreal. His son caught 4-pounders. I've caught 4-pounders and 3s out of there. I had another guy. He was fishing a Wild West bass tournament and caught right around an 8-pounder, and I'll put that picture right here too. So guys, use quality components. You don't want to catch a bigger bass and just have it break on you because you used a cheap 10-cent swivel. Use quality components. I can't stress that enough. And with that being said, just some do's and don'ts that I found over my last year of making these things. Do not use music wire. That wire rusts. Now that's the first wire that I started out with from a recommendation on a video from YouTube that I found, and it rusted within a week. Don't use music wire. Some people like to take those little construction flags from Home Depot or just off the street somewhere. That stuff is way too thick. I mean, maybe some people want thicker wire, but that stuff's that's like throwing cable, man. I will link all the stuff that I use with the diameter. I typically use a 0.035 millimeter diameter wire, which is considered a flex A-rig. And the reason for that is when you're reeling in the A-rig, you can jerk your rod and the arms will actually close in, and then when there's less tension, they open back up. So you've got this little darting school looking bait fish lure, and it's amazing. So I only use 0.035 millimeter diameter wire. And getting back to the do's and don'ts, do not heat up this wire. If you heat it, I know it makes it easier to bend, but it weakens the wire. Do not do that. They are real high quality rigs for homemade, and hopefully this video will help you guys make some for yourselves. This is the final product of the A-rig right here. You can see I've got owner hyper wire swivels here on the baits and owner hyper wire split rings, and up here the most important swivel, that is an owner hyper wire swivel there as well. And you can see I've got a little keeper there, so when you're not using it, it folds up nice and tight. You can see right here I've got a couple of dummy center springs, and everything, it's all around quality. I'm gonna make a P-line cross lock swivel A-rig here at the end, because most people, they do seem to prefer the cross locks. It's quick and simple, and they can change out swim baits. So today I'm gonna make a P-line cross lock A-rig, which is this guy right there. That will be on the end. These are the basic tools that I use to make my A-rig. You need a good set of split ring pliers. I tried buying a cheapo pair, about a $10 pair, and they suck. These are on Tackle Warehouse. This is a wire looping tool. These are just a little, I don't know what you call those, clamp pliers. I have no idea. Just little pliers there that lock, whatever you want to call it. This is a crimping tool. The best crimper I found, and you could see, well, let me turn this around here. You can see the teeth in there. Let me see if I can get a better shot. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there are teeth in there. And that is a good crimping tool for this. These are P-line heavy duty wire cutters. I've got a soldering iron. I'll show you what that's for. And these are all the components that I use. This is a 10-inch wire, and all this is 0.035 diameter wire. This is 10-inch, 12-inch, 16-inch, and 24-inch. These two over here, 8-blade 5-wire rigs. And this guy right here, I could not live without this thing. This is a wire former. It's made by Boggs Professional Tackle Maker. This was $80, $80 or $90, and this was a must for me. I make a ton of A-rigs for people, and this thing is worth every single penny. So if you want to make the loops right here, if you want to make these loops on that main wire right there, get yourself one of these. But you don't need all this stuff. I just make a ton of these, so it was worth it for me to have everything. And again, we'll start making these, and I'll go through step by step what you need. And this right here is solder and flux. I use that to actually solder the head of the A-rig together. It's rated for 35,000 pounds PSI of pressure, and I'll show you why I use that here when I get started. We are going to make my standard 5-wire 4-blade flex rig. And first you want to start off by making the main wire there. This is just a 10-inch wire, and it's going to be the 8-inch arm. So you're going to need 1 inch for each side of the loops. And this is where I have to use my, sorry about this, I have to adjust this, but you can see there's a measuring device. Well, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a measuring device right there. And it's a little off, so I have my own line etched in right there. That's about 1 inch. So you want to start off making an R bend and bend it back a little bit this way. It kind of evens out. That arm makes it just a little bit straighter. And do the same thing on this side. Make an R bend and go a little bit on that side. There you go. This really doesn't matter too much. I'm not too concerned about this being bent this way and this way. They're just going to be loops. So, and each side has a swivel on it, so that really doesn't matter. Okay, and we are going to make a cross lock, a P-line cross lock. A-rig. And so we'll go ahead, and this is how you use this forming tool. I put that in there, in the little tube. Put that around the post, and there's a little cut there in that little sleeve, that tube sleeve. Just fits like that. And you just twist it. And there you go. We just made a perfectly formed main wire there. And we do need to leave this open for later. Okay, we just made the main wire right here. That is 8 inches in length. The next thing we need to do is we need to use, this is 16 inches right here. And we're only going to be using 14 inches of it. My secondary arms are 7 inches for the secondary baits, and the dummy baits is on a 5-inch wire. So that requires 12 inches of wire. Plus you're going to need 1 inch on each side for the loop. So that's 14 inches. And you can see right here with my awesome measuring tool here, this is 16 inches. That says 16 right there. You probably can't see that. But all right, let's form this again. We can form one side of this right here, and we'll chop it down. I like to do that. I like to bend to one side first. There's one arm. All right, we just made one bend there on the 16-inch wire with our, we've got our P-line crosslock swivel on there. So we'll go ahead and we'll form that loop. Stick that in there. Let me adjust the camera. Sorry for the adjustment there. Again, you feed the wire through the tube. You see it comes out over here. And there is a notch on that side. You put that wire in the notch and you just twist it. So there you have it. This is one of our bait arms right there. And so we'll set that over there for now. We'll get another 16-inch piece of wire here. And we will make the next loop. The next R-bend, I guess is what they call it. And we will form our next loop. And there you go. So we've got our main wire right there. That is now 8 inches. Each one of the loops there takes 1 inch. And these are going to be our other 7-inch and 5-inch arm, and that's where the durability of these come in, is the two secondary arms and the dummy bait arms is one piece of wire. I do not crimp these, so it is impossible for these arms to pull out of one of my rigs. The only thing that could ever happen is if I have an owner hyperwire swivel break. And I'm sorry, that is not on me, that's on owner. But I have not had one owner swivel fail yet, but I have had several other low quality, just off-brand cheap swivels fail and break. So please do not use a cheap swivel. It is worth it to spend the extra quarter. If you want to go cheap on anything, you can go cheap on the swivels for the blades and the split rings for the blades. I actually prefer Bass Pro Shops split rings because they are tiny. They're like little, I can't remember what they call them, but little thin little split rings, finesse split rings or something. Oh, fine split rings, there you go. Bass Pro Shops makes a fine split ring. I use either the number 2 or the number 3 size. I prefer the number 2 because they are smaller. And so if you're going to go cheap on the blade swivels and the blade split rings. But that's it. Everything else needs to be quality parts. Well, your center springs, I guess, could be just any sort of quality, but I'll tell you what, I've ordered some of those before and they've sucked. They don't close right, and they come off of the loops there sometimes. So find a brand where these things do not come off real easy. But even if they do, you can still use them. You're screwing your bait up to the arm anyway, so once they're on, they're on. They don't come off. But I just like to use quality components, so buy the ones that are not. I'll see if I can get a close-up of that. You can see here how it's not a closed area right there. The two wires aren't touching, so these can actually come off, but once your bait's on, they stay on. Okay, the next step is to measure out from here, and you want a total of 12 inches with 7-inch secondary bait arms and 5-inch dummy arms. So you're going to have 12 inches plus 1 inch for the loop, so measure out 13 inches, which is why I have this little handy, it's just a little crappy drawing there, but that's why I have that on my table. And to keep the arms even, measure from the same exact spot right here. You can see I measure right there at the beginning of that black line. I measure right there at the beginning of the black line for both the arms. So 7 inches plus 5 is 12, 1 inch, that's 13. Sorry for the marker coming off there, but you could see that is 13 inches. So I just bend it over here, cut that down, throw that in my little, and then you don't need to measure the second one for consistency. Just so the arms are as close as they can be. There you go. And this is why you need to have good quality pliers, good quality dikes. These are P-line. I love them to death. They are fantastic. Okay, at this point, what we need to do is we need to put all the blades and the swivels and stuff like that on. So the first thing we're going to need is a little crimp. Sorry, I'm going a little bit slow here. I'm trying to make sure I'm capturing all this. So you're going to have a crimp, and then I put a bead, and then a swivel, then a bead, then a crimp, a bead, a swivel, a bead, a crimp. So I know there's a lot of parts here, but we have the crimp on. So now we need a bead. The bead is now on. Put the swivel on. Another bead. And again, I will put all the description to all the beads, the sizes, where I get them, all that stuff. I'll put that in the description of the video here. And then we need another crimp. Okay, so that is what one side is going to look like. And we're just missing the split ring and the blade. So we need the other side. There is a crimp, a bead, another swivel, another bead, and one more crimp. So there you go. So you can see this is going to be on the 7-inch side. This will be on the 5-inch dummy side. And now that we've got all the hardware on there that we need, and I don't like to put the split ring with the blade on just yet, because I find it's easier to do on my bends and put it together without having extra hardware dangling in the way. So at this point we have all the hardware on that we're going to need for these basically 2 arms when we bend it. So now we could make the other loop on this side. So we'll come back over here. We'll do an R form. Bend it back just a smidge. And then we'll take our center spring. So now we have one complete arm. We're going to have all the hardware up for the dummy bait side and all the hardware on for the secondary bait side. So just repeat that same process with this arm right here. So we need a crimp, a bead, need a swivel, a bead, a crimp, and it's real easy to lose your place here. So you need another crimp, another bead, another swivel, last bead. Come on, bead. There we go. And last crimp. So double check that you have all your hardware on before you form this last piece right here, or else you're going to ruin one of your arms. So that looks good. Let's make that other bend down, that other loop. Feed this in through here. Get another center spring. And there you go. Now we have all our arms made, all our hardware is on, and like I said, I can make one of these things in 13 to 15 minutes. I'm just going a little bit slower, trying not to screw this up because I've screwed up a ton. It's real easy to do, real easy to lose your concentration. Okay, So now when you bend these, we have to bend them to make the two arms here. So again, make sure you bend them in the same spot. On that black line there, we want 7 inches. So with my awesome ruler system here, go to the number 7, bend it. Make sure your hardware is on each side before you bend it, because there's no unbending this. And I just take my fingers and obviously and bend this. There you go. So you can see there's our dummy bait and there's our secondary bait. So that one is done. Go to the next arm. Again, measure it at that black line. Make sure all your hardware for the dummy bait side is over here, and all your hardware for your secondary bait arm is over there. 7 inches, bend it. There you go. All the hardware is on the right side. So now at this point, you take your main arm. You take the second arm, put that on there. Now this is the main swivel here, the main head swivel. I put that on next. It doesn't matter because the swivel, it moves around. But when you're putting this next one on, make sure your dummy baits are on the same side and your secondary bait arms are on the same side. That is very important. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we can form this. And there you go. We have an A-rig. It's not all permanently together, but I'm sure you can see how it's coming together. Less than $5, less than 15 minutes total. And you can see 8-inch arm, 7-inch dummy arms, 7-inch bait arms, secondary bait arms, 5-inch dummy arms. And we will piece our split rings, blades, and swivels together at the end. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start up my soldering iron, start heating that up while we're putting the rest of this together. Okay, so while that is heating up, what I do next, you have your dummy bait arm on the outside, secondary arm, then your main line, your next secondary arm, and then your next dummy bait line. Line that all up, lay that flat, and you could pull it tight. Hopefully you can see that. So it's, and you can kind of center the, flatten out your loop there. Hopefully you can see that. Get it up close. So you can see how it's all nice and flat. And that's where these guys come in. And make sure it's nice and tight. There you go. Flatten that up. Make sure that's nice and all flush and straight right there. And what I will do, just to help that stainless steel stick a little bit better to the wires, I'll scuff up that just a tiny bit. You can, hopefully you can see that's roughed up a little bit. It just seems to help that stick a little bit better. I do that on both sides. That just seems to help the solder stay on there a little bit better. And you could maneuver this, make sure it's nice and how you want it, all nice and tight. Giggity. You can see there's a little bit of separation right there between the two wires. That's fine. You can just close it together when you're actually soldering it. But I'm going to give this a couple more minutes to heat up. I want that to be nice and hot. I don't want to screw around with any low temperature on there, so I will be right back when this thing heats up. I'm going to give it about 5 minutes. Okay, so at this point, my soldering iron is heated up. And I'm going to put just a dab of flux on there. And that, from what I understand, that flux cleans the impurities in the wire. And it helps with the bond. It's needed for the bond of the solder to the actual wire itself. I'll put a nice dab on there. We'll smooth all this out. I'll take my glasses off for this. But try not to solder that main wire or that main swivel. And then a little dab of solder here. You want solder across the whole thing. And like I said, this is rated for 35 psi, or 35,000 psi. Sorry, I'm screwing up a little bit. I'm trying to watch the video while actually doing this, so it's a little not my best work, but that's the good thing about soldering. You can keep going until you're happy with it. But make sure all these wires are coated. I make sure every single one of my welds, one of my solder joints, I make sure they all look perfect to me before I even decide I'm done. And that one right there looks good. I'm covering up that main loop right there, which is what I want. And I want the solder to cover all the wires, both sides, all four sides. No solder on the actual bait swivel. I didn't heat this up at all, and this isn't hot enough to actually weaken those arms right there. And now I just need a minute for that to cool off. And then what I do is, while that's cooling off, I'll go ahead and put some split rings on the blades here. And I like to pre-rig these so that way, you know, it's more like an assembly line when I'm doing a bunch. With you guys at home, it probably doesn't matter, but I mean, only talking 45 seconds, but I'll sit out here for like 2 hours and I'll just put split rings on blades. Split rings on blades. Okay, so this is nice and cool. We're done with those pliers. And now we need our crimping pliers. And I just eyeball this, you know, do it however you like, wherever you want to position them. What I generally do is I start with the dummy baits and I'll put it about, I don't know, maybe about halfway up. And the first one doesn't matter, I just crimp and it's on there. And the second one, because I've got the beads on there, I need to give it a little bit of a gap so that swivel falls like that and then re-crimp it. Because you need those blades to spin around and stuff and move freely. So you need a little bit of space right there between the beads. And so the next one, I will line up to that one. And what I do is I look at the beads. Okay, right there, that seems good. Crimp. And then get that other crimp there. Again, you need to have a little bit of a gap so it starts to fall. And now you can see your dummy bait arms are crimped. So what I like to do is I'll move one of my secondary bait arm crimps up. you can see how it kind of, a lot of times I like to start my next crimp just under that, but I'm going to make this one a little bit lower. You could put it, I've got a little fly that's driving me nuts here. I'm going to put it a little bit lower than that. Crimp the top one. Again, make sure to give a little bit of a gap there so that swivel can turn around freely. Okay. Again, line up the beads. I don't really care about the crimps so much. Just make sure the beads are about the same. Crimp the top one. Give it a little bit of a gap. And crimp. There you go. All right, we are darn near done. And I do have I've got a keeper split ring that goes around all of these. So that's what actually is used for carrying. There you go. Just keeps it kind of closed up. And of course, when you're using it, you know, you just move it out. Kind of a nice little cheap keeper there. Okay, so the next thing, let's get our blades on there. Like I said, guys, these split ring pliers are just simply amazing. If you're planning on doing this, you know, for yourself, I mean, if you plan on making more than just one A-rig, get yourself some quality tools. It makes all the difference in the world. I started out with just cheap wire cutters that I had around the house. I went through them in like a day or two. I don't know, that's probably about maybe 25 A-rigs. And the other split ring pliers I had were just for $10. They were just unusable. These are amazing. I mean, you can see how quick and simple it goes on. Last one. Yeah, I'm sorry if you guys have a shadow. Hopefully you get the gist of what I'm doing here. But there you go. That is a $30, $25, $30 A-rig all day at the store. And it lasts a lot longer because these wires, the secondary bait arm and the dummy bait arm, it's all one arm. You're not going to break that. And then here, I just kind of measure out whatever. That looks good. Put that on. You want to leave a little bit of that exposed there. Just like that. Looks good. And now we get to go play with fire. This might be too big of a split ring. I make other A-rigs as well. This is just the only A-rig, or excuse me, the only split ring that I seen over there that I grabbed, the only size. So we'll use that. We'll go with it for now, but you get the idea what the split ring is for and how to put it on now. And this, you can use a lighter or whatever for your shrink wrap. I just like a torch because, you know, it's fire. It's a torch. I mean, you gotta have fun doing this, right? And if there's not a little bit of a little element of danger to where you can burn yourself, I mean, it's really not that fun. There you go. Pull that tight, and then I just put it up. You don't want to cook that wire. Do not cook that wire. There you go. That is it. Make sure you turn off the fire. There we go. Ouch, that's a little warm. But we now have a complete A-rig. And I'll go ahead, yeah, it doesn't come off. And I'll show you how to bend it too. Don't ever, well, I need to let that cool a little bit, but while that's cooling, don't ever just grab these arms and yank them. Grab them from right here. It makes a nice little flat area. So grab it from here, just behind the O-ring, just behind the split ring. Actually, just bend it up a little bit. Take your thumb and kind of thumb it up. Do the same thing with the other one. I'm not doing this very gentle, but I don't care. I make these things, so, you know, I don't need them to last forever. But that looks good there. And you take your secondary arms and just do the same thing with that. And you can see how these arms come out of the head there. I mean, you got a left side one and a right side one. I mean, that is perfect. I like to bend them down and away a little bit from the main arm. Down and away. There you go. That's how I like to run my A-rig, right there. So you can see you've got the cross-lock swivels there. 5-wire, 4-blade, 0.035 diameter flex rig. That right there sells for $25 to $30 at a store. I could make these things for less than $5. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe. And this is what I was talking about with those little center springs, how they come off a little bit. If the gap there between the turn and the main shaft there, if it's not tight, they can come off a little bit. But once you get the baits on, they're perfectly fine. But if you like this video, let me know. And again, I will post some pictures, or I will put some pictures in the video here of some of the fish that I caught and some other people caught that they've sent me. But that is a nice quality A-rig using quality parts for under $5. You can't beat it. I dare you to try.